Standing Committee on International Trade. Before we begin, I need to ask all members and others in-person participants to consult the cards on the table for guidelines to prevent audio feedback incidents. Please take note of the following preventative measures in place to protect the health and safety of all participants, including our interpreters. Use only a black-approved earpiece. Keep your earpiece away from all microphones at all times. When you're not using the microphone, please place it face down on the sticker placed on the table. Today's meeting, of course, is taking place in a hybrid format. For anyone who wishes to speak, please raise your hand. And if any technical issues arise, we will suspend until those are corrected. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Tuesday, October the 17th, 2023, the committee is resuming its study of the 2026 CUSMA review. And we're very happy to have Minister Ng with us today, Minister of Export Promotion, International Trade and Economic Development. It's terrific to have you here. You haven't been here for a little while, so it's especially nice to have you here today. Well, it's because we welcome you and we appreciate you so much when you come. Also with the Minister, we have from the Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food, Matthew Smith, Chief Agriculture Negotiator. And from the Department of Foreign Affairs, we have Trade and Development, Rob Stewart, Deputy Minister, International Trade, Aaron Fowler, Associate Assistant Deputy Minister, Trade Policy and Negotiations, Mark Ellen, Director General of North America, and Mary Catherine Spears, Director General, North American Trade Policy and Negotiations Bureau, a group we look forward to being able to ask questions of as well. Minister Ng, we turn the floor over to you.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon to you and to all of the members of the Trade Committee. Let me begin by commending the committee for the unanimous decision to study the upcoming 2026 CUSMA review. There are some things we may not agree with in this place, whether it be climate change or tax fairness or reproductive rights, but one thing that I think we can all agree on is the importance of free trade with our North American allies to the Canadian economy. Le Canada, les États-Unis et le Mexique ont la chance d'avoir des frontières communes développées.
We have the great opportunity to have trade and cooperation across the border, which is excellent. This deep relationship has evolved over decades. CUSMA is simply the most recent chapter in this relationship.
En 1988, nous avons signé l'accord historique de libre-échange entre le Canada et les États-Unis. En 1994, le Mexique a été ajouté. La CIM est devenue le successeur à l'ALENA et continue à nous offrir un accès préférentiel aux États-Unis et au Mexique, tout en améliorant la compétitivité du marché nord-américain.
Yes. Yes, Mr. Cannings?
I'm not getting English translation online.
Okay, just hold on a minute. We seem to be having a problem.
This is the English channel. This is the English channel. This is the English channel.
We'll give it a try again.
Is it better now? Where did it leave off?
What happened was when you started speaking English again, I got French instead.
Okay, so maybe I'll just start where
Yes,
that.
please.
Okay.
Mr. Drouin? Yes, we're testing a translation for a second, so say something.
Okay, le Canada, les États-Unis et le Mexique.
Canada, the United States, and Mexico have the great fortune to have common borders.
Proceed, ma'am.
All right. The modern era of free trade in North America began with the Canada-U.S. Free Trade Agreement in 1988 and deepened with the historic creation of NAFTA in 1994 with the inclusion of Mexico. Following lengthy and intense negotiations, CUSMA emerged as the successor agreement to NAFTA and continues to safeguard Canada's preferential access to the United States and Mexico while driving integration and competitiveness in our North American market. The numbers speak for themselves. CUSMA, that market represents 506 million consumers and a combined GDP of $42 trillion. Trilateral merchandise trade between our three countries reached $1.9 trillion in 2023. That's a 3.5 increase over 2022, but nearly a five-fold increase since 1993. The result is one of the most unique and successful trading blocs in the world, one which has benefited Canadian exporters, our businesses, innovators, producers, and workers, and the communities across Canada from coast to coast to coast that are supported by trade. It's why our government fought so hard for CUSMA. Despite the short-sighted pleas from the opposition to capitulate to the White House, we stood firm, and we delivered an ambitious and progressive agreement that will benefit Canadians. We stood up for Canada when others told us not to bother. Earlier this year, the Prime Minister announced that myself and the Minister of Industry would spearhead a Team Canada engagement strategy to reinforce the value of this trade agreement and what it brings. In my discussions with businesses and workers across Canada and throughout North America, one message stands out. Our trade relationship is not just a special one, it is an essential one. We must do everything we can to preserve, to strengthen, and to deepen it. Quite simply, CUSMA provides certainty and stability, an increasingly rare and important asset in the face of global uncertainty. The international community is still coming to terms with the realization that global supply chains are more fragile today. To strengthen and to make our supply chains more resilient in the face of future global shocks, we must work closely with our allies and with our neighbors. Last month, I joined U.S. Trade Representative and the Mexican Secretary of the Economy in Phoenix for the fourth CUSMA Free Trade Commission meeting. These meetings are a recognition that this complex and ever-evolving trading relationship requires maintenance. This year, we agreed to strengthen our joint preparedness to address emergency situations, ensuring that free trade can remain a source of predictability and resiliency. We also agreed to strengthen trilateral cooperation, including the integration of small and medium-sized businesses into supply chains, bolstering North American competitiveness and increasing opportunities for our workers. We agreed to jointly collaborate on issues related to non-market policies and practices that could undermine CUSMA and harm our workers. But perhaps most importantly, we agreed that CUSMA is a high-standard, ambitious agreement that creates new opportunities for all. However, to ensure that CUSMA remains the gold standard agreement, it contains a requirement to review its operations, and the 2026 review will allow us to ensure that CUSMA remains effective and responsive to the current economic conditions. This joint review process is not a renegotiation, but rather it's a focused checkpoint to ensure that CUSMA remains relevant and continues to strengthen our region's competitiveness and resilience, all while serving Canada's interests. This type of cooperation is made easier by the fact that our countries enjoy shared values and a shared respect for the rules-based international order, including high environmental and labor standards. A shining example of this is the auto sector. From Oshawa to Oakville to St. Thomas to Windsor, we know Canada's auto sector has long been a global leader. We also know that the auto sector is undergoing a profound transformation. Blessed with tremendously talented workforce and people, a reliable and clean energy grid, access to critical minerals, a deep integration with the American and Mexican markets, our focus is to produce electric vehicles and their components right here in Canada. It's why we're building Canada's comprehensive EV supply chain and creating thousands of good-paying jobs. Ultimately, this review process is an opportunity to ensure that CUSMA remains up-to-date and adaptable. And since CUSMA was ratified, we've grappled with a global pandemic, Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine, and other geopolitical shocks. The stability provided by CUSMA is more crucial than ever. Quite simply, our economic interests, our trade interests, our national interests, and our national security are inextricably linked, and CUSMA mutually reinforces each and every one of them. I look forward to this review process and to ensuring that the agreement and its implementation continues to proceed well and that trilateral cooperation remains strong. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I look forward to taking questions from the committee.
Thank you very much, Minister Ng. On to members. Mr. Baldinelli for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Minister, thank you for being with us this afternoon. Forgive me for not joining in the chorus and singing along with your notion on your Liberal side of Kumbaya. Instead, Minister, during your time in office, your record is one of failure. Minister, sadly, under your watch, Mexico has now become the United States' biggest trading partner. No longer is it Canada. Minister, given your record, Canadians can be excused for harboring some concerns regarding your government's negotiating skills. Minister, you talked about standing up for Canada and CUSMA. Essentially, you were presented a deal. The United States and Mexico had come to an agreement. It's either take it or leave it. That's what your stand had taken, Minister. Minister, despite CUSMA being negotiated, there's still issues such as rules of origin, dairy, steel and aluminum, digital services tax, forced labor, softwood for 9 years now. We've had past witnesses testify that the U.S. is most likely to use this review to push its views on current trade disputes to obtain more favorable outcomes. How does Canada respond when the U.S. Trade Representative, Catherine Tai, has already indicated at a Brookings Institute event in March? The question is always going to be, do you have enough? Have you changed the leverage composition to get the political solution you need? Minister, how do you respond?
Let me start with your contention that we took any deal. To the contrary, we wanted a good deal, and only a good deal for Canada. You might remember that you and your colleagues suggested that we just take any deal. We didn't do that. We protected dispute settlement, we protected the cultural industries, and we protected IP. That's what we did in renegotiating CUSMA. Today, it is and it continues to be a hallmark agreement to create competitiveness for our workers and for our people while fighting climate change and transitioning our economy so that they can be strong and creating jobs. The various issues that you raised are, of course, important ones. And in a trade relationship that's nearly $2 trillion, you would expect that there are issues, and those issues are being dealt with. I'm happy to take, to answer each of them individually, but suffice it to say that that in this review, the work that we need to do in all of my conversations with American businesses, with American labor, workers, Canadians, providing stability and certainty is what we must do because our competition is not in North America. It's what we need to strengthen in our competition.
Well, let me just build on that. One recent witness who appeared at the last hearing, Meredith Lilly from the Simon Reisman Chair of International Economics at Carleton, she talked about this review and taking a three-pronged approach. First, the need to be proactive, and that's why we're meeting here today. Need to demonstrate that, the three parties, how the agreement is beneficial to all, including dispute settlement. And third, to address the elephant in the room, which is China. And the recent tariffs both the U.S. and the EU have undertaken. Canada needs to address Chinese overcapacity. Minister, on May 14th, the U.S. acted and placed tariffs, not only on steel and aluminum, but also on EVs coming in from China. And then the EU responded again just as of yesterday. So why is it taking so long for Canada to respond and look into this matter?
Canada has been at this matter from day one. And let me be clear to everyone here in this committee and to Canadians who are watching. Canada is not going to be a backdoor to the U.S. market or a dumping ground for unfairly traded goods. We've been very clear about that. Canada is committed to building a EV supply chain for the future of North America. Canada and the United States have been building automobiles for over 100 years. The auto sector is changing dramatically, but Canada is well positioned from critical minerals to batteries to the assembly and the production of electric vehicles. It's going to be made in Canada, and we're going to protect our Canadian workers. We have...
Minister, just building on that, if I could, then. So why is Ford Motor Company said it's going to slow production of its EV production to 2027? The GM facility in my community, just next to my riding, has already indicated it's going to slow down the timing of its EV battery production. There are 300 employees that have been laid off. Their V6 line has already been torn out, and GM has made the decision that it's not ready to proceed. We've had witnesses like Brian Kingston come forward saying there's a disconnect between this government's economic, environmental policies and its investment policies. And we're looking for alignment with what's going on in the United States, for example, in terms of the EV. So how is it that we can facilitate the growth of the EV market in Canada when we can't get a critical mineral mine built for 15 years? Our supply chain is not there, Minister. I mean, we're not getting sales by Canadians to buy EVs because the cost is too high in this country. We're going to become a dumping ground for China, which has dominated the EV market. So how is it that we're going to respond to that?
Well, I would like to talk up the Canadian economy on this side. and
Tell that
and-
to the 300
and-
workers who are now laid off
well, why
at the
don't we talk
GM
about-
facility, a place that I used to work at, Minister. There's 300
Point of
people
order,
that are no
point of
longer
order.
working there.
The minister
Point-
to respond. You have no time left as it is.
Point of
Minister,
order,
if you'd like to
Madam
respond.
Chair.
I'm sorry. Yes.
We got to be mindful of the interpreters. We've already been through certain areas. If two people are talking at the same time, that's not good for interpreters. So I would ask that when questions are asked to the minister, that we let the minister respond and that we respect the folks that are interpreting for those that are
Thank
trying
you
to have a
very much for
conversation.
raising that issue. Minister, I believe, turn the floor over to you.
Sure. It is precisely a plan for the environment that has created the billions of dollars of investment into the EV supply chain, all the way from critical minerals to processing to the building of the batteries. I don't need to repeat the investments, whether it is from Stellantis or most recently with Honda or Volkswagen, some of the most significant. Those batteries and those cars are going to be built in Canada, and it's going to create thousands upon thousands of jobs in Canada. And it isn't just in the automobile floor shop. It is going to be the entire value chain and supply chain, which is what is also very exciting. The kinds of investments that are being made to make sure that workers in places like Windsor, who were not seeing growth, are now so excited. Small businesses are growing. Workers and homes are being built. It is exciting, and it is because of a plan on the environment, a plan to be able to build electric vehicles, and the investments that are here, and that work is very well underway.
Thank you very much, Minister. On to Mr. Sheehan, please, for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Minister, for your presentation and being here for the CUSMA review. But I'd be remiss not to mention that under your tenure, you've seen other trade deals that have come to fruition. And could you speak to how, having CUSMA and all these other trade deals are good for Canadian workers and the Canadian economy?
Indeed. Canada is enviable. We used to be able to say that we were the only G7 country with a free trade agreement with every other G7, but now we're the first because others have joined that as well. And we continue to negotiate agreements because I think now more than ever, the rules-based international order and the rules that govern trade is what investors and businesses are looking for, and it's good for businesses, it's good for workers. And the reason that rules matter is because it gives predictability and certainty to businesses and to investors. And Canada is so well placed for that as a country that respects the rule of law, in particular that around open and free trade under a rules-based system. But having a strong North American competitive trading bloc, together with those countries and those trading partners in Asia, including Japan, Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, Vietnam, Malaysia, and then the entire European Union, means that Canada is in this well-positioned place. I talk to countless investors and countless businesses who look to Canada as a destination to invest, who look to a destination to grow, and to look as a destination to partner because of our access to a number of the trade agreements, but it is also the incredible talent that we have in this country. It is the excellent investment environment that we have, particularly for the economy of the future, that is greater reliant on services, greater reliant on solutions that will actually deal with climate change, because they're solutions, and they're solutions that at the one hand deal with climate change, but they actually also will grow those incredibly innovative entrepreneurs and businesses. I know you've got a bunch of them, but certainly all across Canada.
For that. And just when you mentioned the Japanese investments, we've seen German investments in particular. I'm an MP for Ontario. And you talked about the supply chain. We have Algoma Steel, Tenaris Tubes in Sault Ste. Marie, and Algoma feeds 50% of its products into the United States, but it also does the car industry on both sides of the border. And, the direct investment, because of CUSMA, the Japanese, the Germans, they're choosing Canada over other places in North America. What is our competitive advantage and why are they doing that? And the second part of that question since we're on steel and we only have a limited amount of time was regardless of what CUSMA looks like, when a president puts 232 tariffs on the guise of national security, and put it on all the world just to, hit everybody, we hit back dollar for dollar with our anti-tariff actions on sleeping bags, Jack Daniels, whatever. And it worked. It worked. And meanwhile, the Conservatives called our anti-tariffs dumb. They thought we should play over and play dead. Could you explain why those anti-tariffs worked so well and got us back on track to free trade?
This relationship is a really important one, and a balanced relationship is also an important one. And we're very proud that we worked very hard with the Americans at the time, and to get those tariffs removed. They were harmful to the Canadian industry, and we were able to get them removed. What you saw there, and what you will continue to see, and what people should continue to expect to see, is Canada standing up strongly for Canadian sectors, steel and aluminum. Canada standing strongly for, indeed, all of the sectors that form this great economy in Canada from coast to coast to coast. It was really terrific. To spend the time with you at Tenaris because of their expansion into Canada even further. But I think at the heart of your question is really what makes Canada so competitive and what makes the investment environment such a good one. And if you look at industries like in mining, like Algoma, or in Tenaris that is actually producing, components. Steel components for the value chain. It is because Canada has an agreement, a strong agreement like the one that we have in CUSMA, and it is because and it is through that, and it's through sort of clean energy that we have here in abundance, a skilled workforce that we have here in abundance. I just spent some time earlier this week with a handful of American CEOs that tell me that Canada is the investment destination because they know they can count on us. They know that the ability to train workforce and have workforce here in their organizations, and the fact that we have a plan on climate is going to produce the kind of energy that is going to be necessary for the industries of the future, all the way from advanced manufacturing to IT, to AI, to quantum, and the list goes on. That's the attractive investment in Canada, and that's the attraction to Canada, which is why you hear me and so many from the Deputy Prime Minister and Prime Minister talking up Canada, because we're simply echoing what others are saying about Canada, because they are making the choices with their investments right here.
How much more time? 25 The last little bit. For the CUSMA review, you talked about the basically the supply chain, but in particular the critical minerals. And it's been said that we are going to overtake China now as being the most important critical mineral source in the world. Could you please comment on that briefly?
We have all of the critical minerals necessary to go into a battery. The investments we've made as a government in investment tax credits and the various incentives is actually creating an environment that is enabling that investment. And yes, Bloomberg has ranked Canada as the top investment destination, particularly for critical minerals. And our American partners are counting on Canada to be a supplier of that critical mineral, which is a direct input into their green economy growth.
Thank you very much. On to Mr. Blanchet-Jonquière, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's Blanchet-Jonquière. Minister, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to welcome you to the committee. I want to talk to you about a topic very important to Quebecers. You are no doubt aware about the software lumber conflict that's been going on. That's a dispute that's been there for decades. In spite of the WTO decisions, nothing happens. We have trade agreements, including CUSMA. I'd like to know this. Do you recognize that Quebec is being penalized by the customs tariffs imposed by the U.S.? They're unjustified.
And they're hurting the industry. They're hurting businesses, and they're hurting the communities and the workers that that this important forestry sector and the softwood lumber industry provides. It's why I had a meeting yesterday with probably the entire softwood lumber industry in Canada to keep working on what on how we can bring the Americans to the table so that we can have so that we can arrive at some kind of a negotiated resolution. That, in our view, is the best. But at the same time, we are being aggressive with all of the other tools that we have, including mechanisms through dispute settlement panels. So we're going to continue to do that. But
Okay. Madame la ministre, j'amène des...
Minister, Quebec is particularly significantly affected. We account for some 20% of softwood lumber exports in Canada, but our businesses account for some 48% of the amounts held back in the U.S. Do you recognize that Quebec, in relation to other Canadian provinces, is being more heavily penalized on softwood lumber?
it was really excellent to have the leaders of the softwood industry, particularly from Quebec, and I hear directly from them and how important their contribution is to not only the Quebec economy but indeed to the Canadian economy. I have been very clear with the Americans, and we've done this at all levels. So myself, the Prime Minister, to register how harming this is and how unjustified these tariffs are. We're going to keep working on that, and it is a priority. And I continue to work with the industry across Canada and certainly in Quebec.
D'accord. Madame la ministre, le Québec est...
Minister, Quebec is being penalized more heavily in softwood lumber than the other provinces. What have you done to deal with that situation? Because things aren't working. You've seen the figures I just gave you. What are you going to do to mitigate that in the CUSMA review?
Well, what we were able to do very recently was establish get the Americans to agree to establishment of a dispute settlement panel. Those have worked in our favor. They've worked in our favor because the rulings that often come out indicate that Canada doesn't subsidize their softwood industry. Having an aggressive strategy there, along with continuing to work with Quebec and the industry for resolution with the Americans, is something that is on my top priority list.
Donc, Madame la ministre, j'aimerais vous...
Minister, I'd like to hear you say that if you represent all Canadians, including Quebecers, why are you accepting the fact that Quebecers are being more heavily penalized in softwood lumber when softwood lumber is a crucial economic sector for Quebec and its regions?
I have to stand up for Quebec as I stand up for the sector all across Canada. I don't accept it at all, but we are fighting it.
Comment vous expliquez ça? Au Nouveau-Brunswick, JD...
How do you explain this? In New Brunswick, JD Ring pays 4% of tax on exports. In BC, companies pay 4% and 5%. In Quebec, Resolute pays 19.86%. How can you explain that imbalance among provinces? You're talking about Canadian unity. You keep repeating it, but how, in international trade, in an industry so crucial to Quebecers, can you accept this without having the ability to negotiate concrete measures to fix this imbalance, which is really hurting Quebec?
If we're a country of rule of law, then I have to also accept the rule of law in which the Commerce Department in the United States does their review. And the U.S. has their investigation methodology, and we object to them on a regular basis.
Il faut aussi accepter la réalité, Madame la ministre.
Minister, we have to accept reality, and your government, given the figures I've just given you, is not capable of tangibly defending an important economic sector for Quebec. That's the forestry sector. You say that your intentions are good, but we have to say that even after favorable decisions by the WTO, you have been unable to tangibly defend Canada's economic interests. Do you recognize that?
Well, I don't accept that. You know, all I can say to you is that I intend and I do stand up for Quebec industries as I do all of Canadian industries. But might I also say that that in Quebec we have seen a tremendous growth on the Bromont to Albany corridor, doing semiconductors precisely between Canada and the Americans in a growing area that is creating hundreds of jobs and creating greater competitiveness for Quebec more than anybody else in that sector because of the expertise that's been developed. The aerospace industry that is seeing a tremendous growth between you know, our two countries, and green aluminum, to which you know, Quebec is attracting incredible investments. I mean, those are the other areas of the Quebec economy that we have stood up for, made investments alongside, precisely to grow the economy so that those very excellent jobs are accruing to Quebecers.
Going.
Thank you very much. Thank you. On to Mr. Cannings for 6 minutes, please.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being with us today. I'm sorry I'm not there in person, but I can assure you it's a beautiful day in the Okanagan. I just want to start with a question not directly related to CUSMA. It is related, and I'll get right to that, but it relates to our study that we've just completed on the negotiations that are underway now between Canada and Ecuador for a free trade agreement. And as you know, Ecuador in 2018 basically tore up its investment protection agreement with Canada and other countries because of the investor state dispute mechanisms that are contained in them. And then after that, their courts found that it was unconstitutional to have investor state dispute mechanisms in free trade agreements with Ecuador. And finally, last month, they had a referendum that put that to bed once and for all. The people of Ecuador resoundingly voted in favor of a motion. They rejected investor state dispute mechanisms once again. And I'm just wanting to get your assurance that Canada will not be pursuing an investor state dispute mechanism in that free trade agreement with Ecuador.
Well, thank you very much. And it would be great, Richard, if you were here too, but I totally understand why being in the Okanagan is, you know, is something a little bit more desirable than being here in the committee room in the basement of West Block. But thank you for that. Thank you for that question, and I want to thank the committee for doing the study on the free trade agreement with Ecuador. I think, in principle, what I would say is that that Canadians should certainly expect free trade agreements negotiated by Canada to respect the values that are important to Canadians, and the Ecuador agreement will be no different. On this particular issue, you know, we certainly are going to, you know, we certainly are going to need to talk to our, you know, through the negotiations, talk to our Ecuadorian counterparts here, because you know, a negotiation is exactly that. We've got it's got to work for Canada and it's got to work for our trading partner, and the balance on this, as you know, is to balance the rights for investors on the one hand, but also allows for a state to have, you know, to be able to govern in their, you know, in their own sovereignty. So so on this one, you know, we will make sure that the negotiations. That the negotiations will be in keeping with the values that are really important to, you know, to Canadians, to all Canadians.
Well, thank you. I do hope that you will take the views of the Ecuadorian people in mind when you do that. And as you know, this directly relates to CUSMA, because in the first version of CUSMA that we're thinking of looking at again right now, one of the, I think the major things that came out of it was getting rid of the Section 11, the ISDS part that was in NAFTA, and eliminating that for trade between Canada and the United States. And I guess I have two questions there. One is I hope that we will continue that. Minister Freeland made a big point of saying what a wonderful thing that was to not have that ISDS provision in CUSMA. And so I hope that we retain that. But it also remains in place. Those ISDS provisions remain in place in regards with trade with Mexico. And there are some people that would like to make sure that it's stronger and expanded. And I'm just wondering if you could comment on that, what Canada's stance would be on investor-state dispute mechanisms if we did reopen CUSMA for renegotiation.
Well, I think that it bears repeating and clarification. The 2026 review is not a renegotiation; it is a review, and we were very proud of the work that was done when it was renegotiated, and ISDS is no longer there, and that position for us hasn't changed.
Okay, well, I will move on then to some of the other provisions in CUSMA, and one of them in the labor chapter is the rapid response process that seems to have been working at least to some extent well. I'm just wondering if you have any lessons learned there, how that has worked, how it could be improved. Again, we've heard from some witnesses that would like to see those mechanisms broadened to include other industries, especially big agriculture workers, so that agriculture labor is treated properly, their rights respected, as the rapid response mechanism is supposed to protect.
So Canada is really proud of our contribution, and when I say our contribution, I really mean the leadership of Canadian Labour, who through the technical sort of assistance funding that Canada provided to help with the rapid response mechanism and the development of that, particularly in Mexico. And if you look at how integrated our market is and how we want to do this more, what you really want is you want workers that are paid fairly and well, and you want the ability for unions to have to do their work and in Mexico. So Canada has played a very, very important role, and at I think the first or the second Free Trade Commission that took place in Mexico, I, along with USTR and the Economic Secretary, visited one such center to see it in its development. So I would say that this is a hallmark of one of the successes. And when we talk about a competitiveness in North America, it has to include a competitiveness that protects and ensures that there's high-paying jobs for workers in all three of the countries. So in response to your question, Canada's contribution has been a good one. It's been a useful one. I certainly hear directly from labor leaders in the U.S., but as well in Mexico, and their gratitude to the Canadian expertise. We are trusted, and we are seen as, and we are experts, and providing that expertise has really helped. And in fact, at the last couple of free trade commissions, the U.S. brought forward labor leaders specifically to give us, all three of the countries, an update on how that part of it was working. At the end of the day, competitiveness in North America has to include growth and investment for our businesses, but well-paying jobs in our sectors, in our three countries. And I think there's a tremendous opportunity here in Mexico in particular because of, the volume of workers that they have. And I think that this bodes well for the North American relationship.
Thank you very much, Minister. On to Mr. Helen for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, From 2001 to 2015, Canada saw a very consistent and steady inflow of investment from the U.S. to Canadian businesses and workers. Since 2015, just 9 years into your government's mandate, that's fallen off a cliff. In fact, there's hundreds of billions of dollars of outflow from Canada into U.S. Why?
Well, I think a $1.9 trillion investment, trading relationship would contradict that.
Why is there a bigger outflow of investment from Canada, Canadian businesses and workers going to the U.S. so that the U.S. workers can get stronger paychecks than Canadians?
I would say that the inflow of incredible investments here in Canada that's creating enormous Canadian jobs, along with the co-investments and the co-collaborations between Canadian companies, innovative companies on a whole range of sectors, is contrary to exactly what you just said.
Can you give me a total of how much inflow has come in the last 9 years? Just a number.
I don't have the direct numbers, but my officials can follow up and give them to you.
I can tell you what the outflow was, though. It was $460 billion that left Canada. If the inflow that was once there fell off a cliff, and now there's outflow more than whatever's coming in, just of 9 years. Can you square that up for Canadians, why that happened?
What I can swear up for Canadians is the importance of this relationship and the benefits to jobs that are growing in Canada as a direct result of this excellent trade agreement.
So you use the word excellent. Canada's in a productivity crisis. 7 straight quarters of GDP per capita decline, and GDP per capita is at lower. It's at the same rate as it was in 2014. Do you think your government chasing out $460 billion of investment was helpful for productivity?
That's your contention. It's not what the numbers show.
The number is right in front of me. There's a report that says $460 billion. Actually, the Bank of Canada, you don't want to take my word. The Bank of Canada said Canada's productivity is a break glass emergency. It's a crisis right now. Do you not believe them? Are they lying?
What I would say is that we're very proud that today, post-pandemic, there is 1.3 billion, 1.3
You're proud that
million
Canadians
jobs.
are getting poorer?
No, I'm proud that there's 1.3 more Canadians that are working since post-pandemic.
But Canadians are poorer. What's to be proud about that?
We're proud that we've got the lowest unemployment rate. We're proud that Canadian workers, particularly in areas like the electric vehicle supply chain, is growing. We're proud that we are leaders in places like AI. We're proud that we're strong, energy, hydrogen developing economy that will provide that in the future into the United States as well as into other trading partners.
So respectfully, Minister, you haven't answered why you're proud of Canadians being poor. But I have to move on because I only have a limited amount of time. There's that recent NSICOP report has said that there are sitting MPs in Parliament.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Madam Chair, sorry. Pardon. Just the line of questioning has nothing to do with CUSMA.
Point of order.
We're here to talk about CUSMA, not foreign interference.
Point of order. Madam Chair, usually members are given the opportunity to ask the full question, to give the full context of what they're asking before a member jumps in, doesn't cite which rule was broken in the member's question he was asking. I understand he wants to protect the minister, but you should at least let the members finish the question so you can hear how security is related to trade.
Mr. Helen, would you continue, please?
There's MPs sitting in this House today, according to the NSICOP report, that are working in the best interest of foreign hostile regimes. This is well known around the world. It's embarrassing for Canada under your government that this has happened, even though your government knew about it since 2020. And more importantly, with our trading partners or allies. What trust would our allies have in any type of agreements with Canada if there are sitting MPs that could possibly be involved in those?
Point of order, Madam Chair. I'm sorry.
Mr. Hallen, the minister's here to answer questions on the Kuzma review. If you could direct your question there, would be appreciated. It is the Kuzma review we're doing.
Absolutely, but it does tie in with trade, and she is the trade
that's
minister.
going about it in a very sideways
I mean,
way.
trade and security is a part of the minister's mandate, is
You
it not?
have 30 seconds remaining. If you could direct it to the Kuzma review, it would be appreciated. That's what the minister is here to speak to.
Minister, how can our allies trust that sitting MPs would be making the best trades that are in the best interest of Canadians and not for foreign hostile regimes?
Maybe a way to answer this would be, because I'll make it about Kuzma, that in the last Free Trade Commission, which was just about 3 weeks ago in Arizona, that trilaterally we are committed to working to ensure that policies or practices that that may be unfair and injurious to the Canada, U.S. and Mexico agreement is something that we will work trilaterally to make sure that we stand up to and that we defend.
On to Mr. Sidhu, please, for 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to the Minister and the entire GAC team for taking time to join us here today to speak about Kuzma and, of course, trade. Minister, as you know, Canada last year was number 3 in the world for foreign direct investment after the U.S. and Brazil. That means companies from all around the world are coming to Canada, setting up plants, creating industry, creating jobs in thousands of communities across our country. It's because of our collaborative approach, but it's also because of the many trade agreements that we have with over 50 countries in the world. And Minister, you know, when I was down in Washington, there was a lot of talk around friendshoring and nearshoring and how we're working collaboratively within the North American market to support industries. Can you perhaps give this committee some concrete examples of how we're supporting industries in North America and working with the U.S.?
Well, I'll start high level and then perhaps give you one example. But at the high level, it's essential that we continue to collaborate on energy security, on our collaboration in the area of building out the green economy, particularly around automobiles and in areas that are really important like semiconductors and AI and quantum. So we have, we've made commitments to do this. We are doing this. But I thought the most interesting example in a tangible way, which is what Kuzma has provided all 3 countries. I thought I would share this example. At the recent Free Trade Commission, we were getting an update, and of all things in the Textiles Committee, and you wonder why would this be so important, and how is this an example for friendshoring or nearshoring? Well, it's a commitment to work together for North American integration and a greater resiliency. What I heard there was that in Canada, there were 2 fire hose manufacturers that depend on an input. And the input is high-performing technical yarn. So it's a very specialized textile that is used in the production of fire hoses. And if we look at today, firefighters, those that are dealing with the devastating forest fires that are caused by climate change, making sure that this particular, yarn is available for those fire hoses is absolutely essential. And Canada found itself in a position where the supplier was no longer, and it was specifically through the committee of Kuzma that worked together, where now they have sourced and found a Mexican supplier that is going to that can produce and provide the Canadian fire hose manufacturer with this technical yarn of this specialized textile. And the reason I illustrate that as an example is that it's a practical example because it speaks to the commitment of trading partners looking for sourced input within the North American marketplace. And the reason this is so important is because I think everyone will agree that fighting fires more than ever today is so important. And imagine not having the resiliency. Imagine not having that particular set of equipment in Canada or in North America. And the resiliency that will come because of this is a practical example of how that committee worked to solve that particular practical issue.
No, thank you for that. And you mentioned fighting fires, and of course, many of us are concerned about the environment and climate change. And trade brings with potential for support to help countries adapt to the impacts of climate change and build future resilience. Minister, maybe you can share with this committee how a strong environmental policy benefits Canadian businesses who want to reach markets around the world, and what would be at stake if we didn't have such a strong environmental policy to support these businesses in these regions?
Well, thank you for that. It's a really important question. You hear a lot about the price on pollution these days. Certainly on this side, we support a price on pollution. It actually will make Canadian companies more competitive. Why do you say that? The rest of the world is decarbonizing. And when the rest of the world is decarbonizing and they have targets to meet in COP or the Paris Agreement, they are absolutely committed to make sure that in their value chain and in their supply chain, that they are looking at suppliers and companies and goods that are meeting environmental standards. We have taken a leadership. We've taken leadership for Canadian companies to be able to export globally and for it to not cost them more to export globally. The reason the price on pollution works, aside from the fact that it also helps 8 out of 10 Canadians, that's just fact, is that, you look at the carbon border adjustment in Europe. We are pretty confident that with the price of pollution here in Canada, Canadian companies will not be subjected to potential future tariffs that will arise because if you're a climate laggard and you're a jurisdiction that's a climate laggard, guess what, company? You are going to export and you're going to pay more because you're going to take on tariffs. You're going to potentially take on tariffs like the CBAM or any other tariffs that will be put forward because you are a climate laggard. So a price on pollution is not only good for Canadians, 8 out of 10 Canadians, it's really good for businesses that will be competitive in the global environment. And I'm glad that we actually have a climate plan. I'm glad that we have a price on pollution. It's incentivizing for companies to innovate and to go green. And in doing that, those very companies in their export is not going to be subjected to future tariffs, which we know are going to come. So on this side, we have a plan, and that plan is going to work, and it's going to make companies competitive.
Thank you very much, Mr. Blanchet-Junquez for 2.5 minutes, and then Mr. Cannings for 2.5, and then we have to shift. The minister will be able to leave, so thank you for staying. If we can just get the last 2 questioners for this round, please.
Merci, Madame la
Thank you, Madam Chair. Minister, have you assessed the possibility of incorporating a different investor-state dispute settlement mechanism in the reviewed CUSMA, yes or no?
No.
Prochain sujet,
Supply management. Dairy producers in Canada said they were concerned about the fact that even if the specialized dispute settlement group for CUSMA rendered a decision that was in Canada's favor on dairy quotas, the U.S. could use mechanisms to achieve what they couldn't get through the complaints process. Producers managed by supply management said they have concerns and their fears are justified, especially with a potential Trump administration, because he said very clearly that if he were elected, he would tackle the supply management system. Do you believe it is necessary as quickly as possible to pass a bill C-282 introduced by the Bloc Québécois to protect supply management?
Well, our government successfully defended supply management during the renegotiation CUSMA. Very proud about that. We've been clear. I've been clear. The Prime Minister has been clear. Everybody on the government has been clear that we're going to continue to protect supply management in Canada. So Canadians should be clear about that. Quebecers should be clear about that. We also, in the renegotiation of CUSMA, protected the dispute settlement mechanism. And it's precisely through that dispute settlement mechanism that there were a couple of panels on this very issue, and that panel has upheld Canada's position. So it's an area that we need to work very hard and to continue to work very hard. We've been very clear. We're protecting Canada's supply management system.
Qu'est-ce que vous allez faire pour rassurer les producteurs?
What will you do to reassure Quebec dairy producers that you will protect supply management?
Well, I think you mentioned a piece of legislation that is making its way through Parliament, and the government has been supporting that. I think the proof is in the pudding, which is that we successfully defended it in the last in the negotiation of CUSMA, and we're going to continue defending the supply management system in Canada.
Okay. Mr. Cannings for 2.5 minutes, please.
Madam Chair, before my colleague asks, I was just wondering, just based on your comments there, with the understanding that the minister has a tight schedule and could be leaving shortly, and I was just, given the importance of the topic and our most important trading relationship, I was hoping perhaps the minister would consider one additional round of questionings, maybe even for 3 minutes from each side.
Well, the minister was to leave at 4:30. I'm trying to complete the round with Mr. Canning so that each party would have had another opportunity, which means it would end with Mr. Canning's with the other 2.5 minutes. No one else scheduled.
That only allows essentially 2 questionings from the main parties.
There's only so much time, and yeah. Mr. Cannings, you have the floor for 2.5 minutes, please.
Well, thank you. And Minister, you were just mentioning CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism that is in the EU, and how that is beneficial for countries with a carbon pricing. I was talking to the steel workers last week, and they brought up the situation that we have here in North America with Canadian steel, the most carbon, the lowest carbon steel in the world, pretty much. And yet we face competition primarily from China, but also from the United States. And even to keep our domestic steel industry going, they were hoping that Canada would consider bringing in a similar mechanism, a border adjustment mechanism, so that their steel would be recognized for those properties. And it would also, I think, help with this backdoor question we have with bringing in cheap steel from China and other parts of Asia that the United States doesn't like. And I'm just wondering, first of all, is your government considering bringing in a border adjustment mechanism? And if so, would that be legal under the present CUSMA?
Well, we have been doing consultations on a carbon border adjustment, and the Minister of Finance has been doing that, and so more will be said, I think, once we get a look at those consultations. But on Canada Steel, in the budget of this year, in budget 2024. Finance has certainly taken steps to increase funding and introduce legislative and regulatory amendments to support workers and industries, and the concern around the overcapacity of steel is a very real one. It's work that Canada does with the United States, but with also other trading partners, and I said this earlier to a different question, but Canada, will not become a backdoor to the U.S. market through, or a dumping ground for unfairly traded goods. So this is something we will continue to work at. I think what we have just implemented together with the steel producers is a country of melt and pour to create greater transparency. I think that too will help. So there's more work that has to be done, certainly, but the issue of overcapacity is an issue for Canada, for U.S., frankly, for the G7. And we need to keep doing work to ensure that the investments that we have made in greener steel actually also, we reap the benefits of that, and it should be treated as such.
Okay, thank you very much.
Well, I would just...
Thank you, Mr. Canning. Sorry, the time is gone. Minister, thank you very much for being here today. It was very valuable information. We will suspend for a moment, and then we will start our questioning with the departmental officials. Bring the meeting back to order. Thank you, Minister, very much. We have the departmental staff here to answer some questions from the committee, and we're going to start with Mr. Martel for 6 minutes, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Merci.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If someone could answer, I'm not sure who to put this question to. Is everything working as it should? The minister said that Canada is not a dumping ground for aluminium. I'm talking about aluminium. She said Canada wasn't a dumping ground and that the three countries work together. I have some difficulty with that when I see Mexico not properly controlling its aluminium imports. I don't see the three countries really cooperating, because the upshot is that Mexico, which is not controlling imports as they should, are at present creating a situation that's unfair. So I'd like to hear you on that.
Thank you very much for the question. I can assure you that Canada works very closely with the United States and with Mexico across the full range of trade issues, including in critical sectors, such as the aluminium sector. I have not heard any concerns expressed with respect to the transshipment of Mexican aluminium into the Canadian market, which seemed to be a situation that was implied by your question. And so if I've misunderstood, then perhaps you could reframe it. But if the concern is with the nature of Mexican aluminium imports from the world, there are a multitude of fora, committees, working groups, and opportunities that are created by the Canada-US-Mexico Agreement for the three parties to have constructive discussions about that. But as far as I am aware, no concerns have been raised with me or my team regarding the possibility of transshipment of aluminum through Mexico to Canada.
Let's stay on aluminium for a few moments. Mr. Fowler, you are, of course, aware of Section 232 of the trade agreement on customs tariffs with the U.S. At present, under President Biden, Article 232 is not being applied, but it exists. If it were applied, it would be very difficult for the industry. And do you have a game plan to deal with it? We've experienced its effects in the past, and it was very difficult for the industry, very tough on them.
Thank you very much for the question, and I fully accept the premise behind it. North American integrated market for trade in products like steel and aluminum is critical to the prosperity of Canada and to the well-being of the aluminum sector in Canada. The United States is not in a position to fully satisfy its own domestic market needs when it comes to aluminum. They rely on imports of aluminum products. and significantly rely on Canadian producers to provide inputs into manufacturing. I've had no suggestion that the United States is reconsidering an imposition of 232 tariffs on Canadian aluminium, and we work very closely with the Canadian sector. It works very closely with its counterparts in the United States and Mexico, and we, of course, work with the United States to ensure that if there were any issues that arose that caused concern for the United States as a trading partner, that we would move proactively to address those, recognizing the importance of the situation.
Oui. Alors, juste pour...
I'll go to softwood lumber for a minute. There is a flagrant lack of leadership. I have a company in my riding that's going to be closing down. It'll close down for at least a month because of tariffs on softwood lumber exports to the U.S. 180 employees will be laid off. There are significant delays in groups formed for dispute settlement purposes. Why is that?
The situation with respect to the treatment afforded to Canadian softwood lumber exports to the United States is unacceptable, that the tariffs that have been imposed by the United States are unwarranted, and that the tariff rates that have been arrived at by the methodologies deployed by the United States are inaccurate and will not be sustained when subjected to a legal challenge. Canada has a very aggressive litigation strategy with respect to softwood lumber. We've made good progress with respect to advancing that strategy in recent months. We have seen new panel formations under the Canada-U.S.-Mexico Agreement to consider different U.S. determinations with respect to softwood lumber, and we will prosecute this to a satisfactory resolution.
Monsieur Fowler, moi j'aimerais savoir, parce qu'il y a des délais constants dans la
Mr. Fowler, it takes a very long time to form task forces for dispute settlements. I'd like to know why it takes so long.
The time that it has taken to establish panels to hear different softwood cases is extremely frustrating to the Government of Canada. We have been pushing counterparts in the United States to move more quickly with panel formation. It is a process. It does take a certain amount of time. And in recent months, as I indicated to the previous question, we have seen an improvement in the pace at which these panels are being formulated. And we have had 2 new panels formulated since the beginning of the year.
Okay, thank you very much. On to Mr. Sheehan for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I don't know who to direct the question to. I don't know if it's Mary Catherine, but I just wanted to ask a question. You know, we're studying the 2026 CUSMA review. And, you know, I've been on the Trade Committee for a while and, you know, witnessed the process that we had undertaken. And I was proud that Canada had, you know, tried to put it like a gender lens on it, an Indigenous lens, union lens, by engaging with the various groups. Will the review be taking into, other than this fine study that we're going to present some information, but you have a couple of years till 2026, you know, are there plans to go back and engage and to take the pulse and to see if what their expectations were in the CUSMA deal, having been engaged, what it looks like now in 2026? To you, Mary.
Thank you for your question. So indeed, we have a fairly robust consultations methodology that we use when we are reviewing our trade agreements, and it is our full intention at looking ahead, as you note, to 2026 to proceed with with broad and comprehensive consultations with Canadians, including a special focus on some groups that have been traditionally underrepresented in trade and whom we have sought to really advance in the CUSMA. We have a specific SME chapter which is designed to encourage and support the participation, for example, of small and medium-sized enterprises and foster their engagement in international trade under CUSMA. And as you note, we do have gender provisions, we have Indigenous provisions, and we will be making extra effort to ensure that stakeholders and rights holders are engaged and informing our views as we prepare for the review.
Thank you for that answer. I'll be sharing my time with Francis Drouin as well today How much time do I have left, just so that Francis knows?
4 minutes.
4 minutes.
Merci, merci beaucoup.
I thank my colleague Forceau Saint-Marie, with whom I'm fortunate to be able to cooperate on questions regarding steel. A question for you on that. When there are allegations of dumping, what recourse do our Canadian companies have? Can they turn to the CITT? Can they go to the courts? Can they work through these tribunals to make sure that there is no steel dumping in Canada?
Yeah, thank you for the question, and that is exactly right, that the Canadian industry has recourse to redressive measures to deal with situations of unfair trade practices, whether those are situations of dumping on the part of foreign companies into the Canadian marketplace, or situations where heavily subsidized goods are entering Canada at a rate that affects the competitiveness of Canadian products in the Canadian marketplace. Those companies and industries in Canada have a right to petition the CIIT to impose measures at the border that would offset the margin of dumping or the margin of the subsidy and its impact on Canada.
Merci, merci beaucoup. Puis je vais mettre mon
Thank you. I'll put on my farmer's hat for a moment. My colleague, Mr. Blanchet-Jonca, talked about how important supply management was in Canada. We are also aware that the U.S. is very protectionist for some foods, particularly those subject to supply management. So the whole issue and the way that we engage in the relationship with the United States, sometimes agricultural groups or agricultural groups in the U.S. sometimes forget that beef may come from Alberta, but it's fed in the U.S. and then comes back to Canada. I think your teams in 2016 had provided us with a hamburger showing full well how integrated our agricultural economies were across the border. Do we still engage in these conversations with the U.S. to make sure that we keep this alive? I'm proud of our economy, I'm proud of our farmers, but sometimes we do have to remind our neighbours to the south of what we really do. Do we do that through our embassies and through our teams on the ground?
Thank you very much for the question. We do absolutely have, as was described, a very integrated economy in the agriculture space with the United States. I know that this committee has already heard from a number of witnesses to that effect, and including the fact that some products move across the border. Many times the import on one side is the input to export on the other. Some products in agriculture may add value more than once and cross the border several times. And that integration is very valuable. It's very well known in the agriculture space. And we do work very hard with our committees and our interactions with industry to make sure that we have all the best and the latest examples to bring to bear. And we work very closely. I'm with the Department of Agriculture, but with colleagues in Global Affairs and our diplomatic presence across the United States at the embassy and in the consulates, but with businesses and with provinces and territories to make that message clear.
Okay, thank you very much. Monsieur Blanchet-Jonquin, please, for 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I applaud my colleague, the member for Glengarry Prescott Russell, who highlighted the Bloc's defense of supply management. I like the hamburger, but let's come back to what we were talking about. Mr. Fowler and other members here today, I and other members here today, are concerned about forced labor that is prohibited under the agreement, and yet a question on the order paper by my honourable colleague shows that no goods have been seized in Canada. Goods produced by forced labor should not be imported. We have billions. The U.S. has billions in seized goods, especially from the Xinjiang region. What mechanisms is Canada putting in place to comply with this import prohibition?
Je dirais que c'est une question.
That question would better be put to border services. You could ask them about their methods and the legislation governing their actions. I can say that we are not as well equipped as the US. We don't have the same authorities to intervene and to seize goods that might be produced through such means. What would you need, Mr. Stewart, to be better equipped? Money, people, structure, leadership, a new legislation. And we are working on that as we speak. This is serious. Organizations have stated that Canada was a gateway for forced labor goods, including solar panels. Have you heard such allegations? And if yes, what actions have you taken to make sure that this does not keep happening?
Si je comprends bien la question.
If I have correctly understood the question, we are trying to be clear with Canadian businesses. We talk to them about goods that are at risk of having been produced by forced labor. In the March 2023 budgets, the government said that by 2024 it would introduce a bill designed to limit forced labor in Canadian supply chains and strengthen prohibitions of goods produced by forced labor. After the last session, the committee adopted a motion in the same vein and wrote to the minister to remind her of her commitment to this government. It's now June 2024. Where is that at? That work is now underway. What's your deadline? I could not answer that question because it is up to the government. Could you give us a written reply and detailed plan? Because people would like to know. I could very likely provide you with more detail on this. Transparency is important, and confidence in our institutions are all under threat of foreign interference. In the fall of 2024, you said it was too early to put forward proposals for the review of CUSMA. And in the fall of 2023, you also said the review had not really been defined. There had been very preliminary discussions between, or among ministers rather. Colin Robertson, Vice President of the Canadian Global Affairs Institute and former trade negotiator, said that even if Canada didn't know what was going to happen in 2026, it should get ready now by setting up a task force. Do you still believe that it isn't already the time to put forward strategies and priorities? Have these been established?
Merci pour la question. Je dirais que c'est.
Thank you for the question. I would say it's still too early to put forward or present future Canadian proposals that will be put on the table at the 2026 review. The work is certainly underway. We are continuing to assess implementation of the agreement, ensuring that it works as intended by the parties. But speaking in public, I would not disclose the proposals that Canada will put forward. The priority for Canada is to ensure that market actions in Canada and the US continue. We needn't wait for 2026 to tackle any problems that might come up in the agreement and in its implementation and operations. We're working very closely with our North American partners and also very closely with Canadian industry to set up proposals where necessary. Mr. Fowler, why is it too early? Why would...
We've got 14 seconds remaining.
Oui, je simplement savoir.
I just want to know, why is it too early? Why does one person say it's not too early and you say it is? why would someone else not agree with you or vice versa? I don't want to speak for Mr. Robertson. I'm giving my own opinion based on my current position as negotiator for the Government of Canada.
Fowler, Mr. Cannings is next, but it looks like we've lost connections or else he's left. So I'm going to go on to Mr. Kimek.
Oh, ça va, j'aimerais le prendre si ça te va. Je te remercie. Thank you, Madam Chair. I wasn't expecting to go this early, but since Mr. Canning is off, it gives me an opportunity to move a motion that was put on notice by my colleague, Mr. Seaback, on Tuesday, June 11, 2024. I'll just read into the record. Maybe Mr. Canning will make it before we have to vote. That given the large workload the committee has on the docket, the committee instructs the chair to book 5 meetings between July 8th and September 13th to deal with unfinished business and pressing matters facing Canadians, such as the impact of the government's cap-and-trade system and EV plant fabrication using offshore steel and other pressing matters as they emerge. I won't prolong the debate too much, but I'm even offering myself to come here after Stampede if you need me to substitute for one of our members on this side, because I would be interested to talk about especially EV plant fabrication using offshore steel. I have fabricators in my riding who would be affected. They were working on the TMX pipeline for many years, and they all were at risk of losing their jobs when Kinder Morgan gave up on the pipeline, when this government decided to basically expropriate the regulation, make it really difficult to build it. I'll mention that there's a report by the PBO that says that the 3 companies who received federal government monies are going to receive in total $43.6 billion from the taxpayer. And I really wonder how much of that will be going to Canadians to build those plants and to ensure that Canadian taxpayer dollars go to them. So that would be worthy of study over the summer to understand how many of those jobs are affected by it. And there's also all the government's different environmental regulations that have trade impact. I was also surprised to note that when the minister was here, that there was a claim that somehow national security is not connected to trade, but they're integral. They're very much the USTR, the trade representative, for the past however many years, whenever you go onto the White House website, they link the two closely together. Section 232 tariffs feature very prominently in Robert Lighthizer book, and the entire conversation in that entire book for USMCA negotiations is strictly about national security needs of the United States government and their wishes. So I just found it completely baffling why the minister didn't understand that connection, and if we're going to have to renegotiate the deal by 2026, this has really deep implications. The minister doesn't even understand that fact, to understand who may be on the other side of the negotiating table, whether it's a Democrat or Republican, it really doesn't matter. They've kind of converged on the matter of China policy. And I'll say as the vice chair of the committee, the Canada People's Republic of China Committee, we look at national security and trade issues that affect it. So I think it's worthy that the committee should return over the summer, meet in person, and continue its good work that it's done so far. Thank you, Chair.
Much. Question to the committee. We have our very smart departmental staff here for, should we wait and deal with this at 5:15 so that some additional questions can be asked? Or do we let the witnesses go and we deal with this motion?
As long the witnesses are here, and as long as we have the agreement of my colleagues that will continue this on after they.
Can we leave the motion till 5:15 so that we can get a few more questions answered from the officials? That's agreed. Okay, we'll deal with the motion at 5:15. Sorry, Mr. Cannings. I guess you've had your time now, so now I will go back to Mr. Cannings.
Madame la Présidente.
Yes, sir.
Oui, point d'information.
Madam Chair, I will also have a motion. Would you like me to wait for later?
So that, we have a couple of people who would like to get some questions of our witnesses. Mr. Cannings, the floor is yours for 6 minutes, please.
Well, thank you, and my apologies for that computer glitch. I had to reboot everything. But thank you to the witnesses for being here. And I'm just going to go back to some of my earlier questions of the minister and perhaps get a little more detail, a little different perspective. And the first one, obviously, is about the investor-state dispute mechanism that we've managed to remove from the Canada-US part of this trade deal. We we've just finished this study on the Canada-Ecuador free trade negotiations that are going on, and Canada seems to be, I would say, taking a pretty hardline stance on ISDS there, despite Ecuador's clear intention of not allowing that. ISDS seems to be going out of favor in many parts of the world in terms of free trade agreements. We have side letters between Australia and New Zealand and the UK when it comes to CPTPP, taking that out. We see the EU changing their views on ISDS. I'm just wondering what Canada's policy on ISDS is, because we seem to be celebrating it being removed from CUSMA and yet pushing it hard in new trade agreements. So I'm just wondering if someone could perhaps fill me in on where we are with investor-state dispute mechanisms that many Canadians think are very, very deleterious to Canadians and Canadian sovereignty, really.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for the question. And I think it is an important question because the government tries to take a nuanced view of investor-state dispute settlement in the context of our trade agreements. It's obvious that clear and balanced rules and an effective dispute settlement mechanism are key to creating a predictable investment climate for Canadian investors abroad. We try to take an approach that balances investor protection with the country's right to regulate in the public interest. In so doing, we look at the domestic legal regime of the country. We assess whether Canadian investors in that country would be able to rely upon the domestic legal regime to swiftly and effectively deal with any issues that might arise in that context. And then we make a determination of whether it feels appropriate in the context of a particular negotiation to seek additional disciplines that Canadian investors may have recourse to. I don't want to speak specifically to any ongoing negotiation, so I won't say what Canada's discussing with Ecuador, but we are certainly aware of the issues that the member asked in his earlier question of the minister with respect to the Supreme Court ruling in Ecuador, and all of that very much informs Canada's position at the negotiating table. Thank you.
So just to be clear, to use the CPTPP as an example, the UK trying to gain accession to that agreement, Australia and New Zealand signed side letters with the UK removing ISDS from those bilateral agreements within that agreement. And yet Canada didn't. Does that mean Canada doesn't trust the UK's legal system?
Thank you for the question. No, that is not how I would characterize the basis for the decision that was taken with respect to the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom was acceding to an existing agreement. The rules of that agreement were already in place. Those rules included access and recourse to an investor-state dispute settlement mechanism. And at the time of its accession, and in our negotiations with them, at no point did the United Kingdom approach Canada about suspending the application of ISDS between us. And so consequently, the basis upon which the UK acceded was the rules that had been previously negotiated in that agreement, and that included ISDS. It wasn't a judgment specific to the United Kingdom.
Well, I was just curious why Australia and New Zealand took a different approach. But I'll move on to, again, a question I asked the minister about some of the parts of the labor chapter, the environment chapter with rapid response mechanism. Just wondering if you might comment on how you think those chapters have worked. Are they doing what they're supposed to do, and can they be strengthened?
Thank you very much for the question. Our view is that the rapid response labor mechanism is working very well. It is working exactly as intended. It has provided a mechanism and a platform for the parties to work together to address specific issues that are brought to our attention, often by labor organizations in one of the three countries. This mechanism has provided a means by which to consider the labor situation in a variety of specific facilities in Mexico. And our view is that in the vast majority of cases, resolutions reached through the RRLM mechanism are key to strengthening union democracy and to promoting labor rights in Mexico. I think our view is that there is every possibility, and we are quite confident that we will continue to collaborate effectively with Mexico in this space and with respect to labor issues more broadly. If there is an opportunity to further strengthen the mechanism down the road, then that is a conversation that Canada would be pleased to take part in.
Thank you very much. Next on my list, I have Mr. Sidhu. There is 3.5 minutes left.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is for Deputy Stewart. Could you share with the committee on how Global Affairs collaborates and works with other federal government departments like agriculture when it comes to trade negotiations? In terms of, let's say, agriculture has an issue. Do you pull in agriculture, the new agriculture office that opened up in Manila, Philippines? How did that come to be? How's that going?
In the normal course, the department, as is often the case, the lead negotiator in a trade negotiation works very closely with other government departments that have interests in the matter, including in particular the Agriculture Department, but there are others as well. And for that purpose, there are a variety of committees and fora in which that collaboration occurs. Indeed, when trade negotiations occur, groups of officials from the various parts of the government go and participate. But in the ongoing administration of agreements, that is also a shared responsibility. Chairs of committees will depend on, under the CUSMA or the CPTPP or CETA will depend on, what the subject of the committee is and where the chair is best placed. The trade office in the Philippines is actually a separate issue. It was a result of the Indo-Pacific strategy that was launched 18 months ago and is part of the broader effort to deepen our trade relationship in the region and to deal with agriculture issues that may arise.
Thank you. Madam Chair, how much time do I have left?
1.5.
Okay. Part of our government's approach is to expand trade and our trade footprint. Minister Ng was recently in Arizona and Texas to open a new trade office in the region in the Grand Canyon state. Could you share more details about this announcement and how this office will support further support Canadian interest in the region?
Happily, I was with the minister in Phoenix, where we announced the opening of the office. It is, according to people who live there, the fourth largest urban area in the United States now. A vast number of companies headquartered in the region. We reallocated resources that we had currently deployed elsewhere in California to Phoenix to deepen our ability to cover trade relationships in that area. We think, because we aren't really in the business of constantly making sure that the allocation of our trade commissioner's service is yielding the maximum benefit.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to the witnesses for taking the time today.
All right. Okay. Let me thank the witnesses very much for coming again to spend some time with the Trade Committee. You are excused to go on and complete the rest of your day. We are going to deal with a couple of motions that we have. So we have Mr. Kimick moved a motion that everybody is aware of. I have Mr. Duran down to speak. Did you still wish to speak to it?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And then Mr. Baldinelli.
So I'm not a regular member on this committee, but I'm seeing a pattern develop over other committees where I've been requesting 5 meetings, and I've heard it verbally, but I think it's probably July 8th until to September 13th, probably.
Yes, yes.
So I can tell that none of them wrote the motion. It came from upstairs, from the leader's office, and I salute the effort, but I know what they're what they're up to. I've been around this place for a long time. They're trying to say the Liberals or whomever does not going to support this motion. We don't want to work this summer, and I respect the other side can do whatever they want. We've talked about national security. They've mentioned national security, how it's important. I will recall to this committee that the leader of the official opposition still hasn't gotten briefed. I salute Elizabeth May. I salute Jagmeet Singh. They've done their job, but back to but it is back to the motion. It's a nice play. It just doesn't have the effect they think it will have.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd like to thank my colleague for his comments. But last I looked, it was the gentleman right back there that wrote this motion for us. And it's in regards to a situation that we think is critical for us to examine during the summer period. I mean, it doesn't have to be 5 meetings. We're amenable to discussing that. But I mean, we're looking at a system that will limit emissions in Canada's oil and gas sector, right? I mean, it's a situation that for Western Canada, I mean, the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers said in a media statement that adding emissions cap regulations to existing carbon pricing and methane policies creates a layer of complexity that could hamper investments in clean energy products. CAP also said that the unintended consequences of the framework could result in significant curtailments, making this draft framework effectively a cap on production. I mean, there's reports out there now that this could be a $600 billion hit to Canada's economy. So this is a major situation that's developing, and as rightly so, we thought it was something that we would want to bring forward for consideration by this committee during the summer period, because I know our agenda is quite full, to be quite honest, and this is something that we could examine during periods of the summer. Again, it doesn't have to be 5. We're open to discussing that, but my hope is that my colleagues will give this fair consideration, and let's vote on it and see where we stand.
Thank you very much. Everybody is fully aware of what the motion says, and of course it would be exciting to be back here in July and see you all again. I think we'd be really excited to do that. So we will ask for a recorded vote. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Fisher.
Do we have, just
no.
hold on, do we have all the members still with us? Yes, thank you.
Mr. Fisher?
Voting no. Thank you.
Monsieur Drouin?
No.
Ms. Atwin?
Opposed.
Mr. Sidhu?
Opposed?
Mr. Sheehan? Mr. Baldinelli?
For.
Mr. Helland?
Yes.
Monsieur Martel?
Yes.
Mr. Kmitch?
Oui.
Monsieur Blanchet-Jonca?
No.
Mr. Cannings?
No.
Is pour 4, 4, nays contre 7.
Terribly disappointed. Would you like to speak to your motion very quickly, sir?
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Soumis par mon collègue Simon-Pierre Savard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It was submitted by my colleague, the Honourable Member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte, Simon Pierre Savard Tremblay. Should I read it?
In front of them, is there any discussion on the motion?
Sur les boutiques hors taxes.
Oh, sorry.
It's about duty-free shops.
I'm not getting translation.
It is about duty-free shops. This is the English Channel.
Cannings?
This is the English Channel. This is the English Channel. This is the English Channel. This is the English Channel.
Mr. Cannings?
This is the English Channel.
Speak French and...
Oui, Madame la Présidente,
Okay,
ça me fait
please, would you
plaisir de
read
parler
it in-
français.
I'd be very pleased to continue speaking French here in Ottawa. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to confirm that colleagues received the motion. Would you like me to read it?
Check your connection, Mr. Canning, because the others here they're getting it.
It's on English, and it was working fine until now, and now it's not.
Madam Chair, does that mean that Mr. Canning wasn't listening when I spoke a bit earlier? That's interesting.
I'll read out the motion in English, Mr. Cannings. It was the same motion that Mr. Savard Tremblay gave us on Tuesday. Whereas the duty-free shop regulations under the Customs Act clearly state that goods in duty-free stores, am I saying this too fast for translation?
No, I think it's okay.
Okay, are for immediate export only and must be declared under the Act of Return to Canada, whereas duty-free stores are subject to strict location, inventory, declaration, and storage requirements to ensure that all products sold there are exported for consumption outside Canada. That the committee recommend that the government recognize duty-free as an export industry, that a clear indication of the nature of this industry be conveyed to all federal agency concerned, and that a report back to the House before the end of the current session of Parliament. That's a bit of a problem when you talk about the current session of Parliament. If the current session of Parliament means when it ends next week, it would be very difficult to do much on this motion prior to the end of the session. Is there any discussion? I think if we're going to do something with it, I think you need to change the end of session because we're not going to have time to get it. But the mover of the motion has to amend it.
I mean, is it something that you would support? Not with the current wording, no. Yeah, I mean, we'd have to fix that.
So if somebody wants to make a change to this, Mr. Blanchette, if you want to, I realize you're doing it for Savard Tremblay, but I think a report back to the House and end there and eliminate before the end of the current session of Parliament because that nothing would be done.
Madame la Présidente?
Yes.
Madam Chair, I'm confident we can do something here.
Yeah, so if we ended it, report back to the House and take out before the current session of Parliament, it would then leave it open-ended. If the committee chose to adopt it, they could work on this when they return in September.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Sidhu.
And maybe a line adding that, and that there be a government response. I mean, what does this really mean? We want to know what the government thinks, right? And that there should be a government response. I don't know if the member is amenable to that.
There has to be some meetings first. Otherwise, it's just a basic motion, period. We adopt the motion and ask for a government response. Yeah, so it's much more like just adopt the motion, raising the issue to the government and asking the government to respond back to the House. Everybody's okay with that? We're all in favor? Okay, that should be good. Not seeing anything else. Meeting adjourned.